Welcome to the Saturday Slam and Jam here on the Athletic NBA Daily. On today's show, we're talking to Mike Vorkunov about the NBA lottery, and then Caitlin Cooper stops by to talk about the Indiana Pacers, and then we'll do some Pacers trivia. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. With me, I have Alex Speers and our buddy, Mike Vorkunov from The Athletic. Mike, what's up?
What's going on? I'm happy that I'm the opening act for Caitlin because that's the way it should be. Like, everyone's like, get through this guy. Let's get to the actual star, please.
She's so good. Every time I talk to her, I'm like, man, I know less about basketball than I thought I did. You know,
Me too.
She's so good.
Me too.
Looking forward to that. So, Mike, this week you got to witness one of the most dramatic and bizarre draft lotteries in NBA history. You were one of the media members invited to the lottery drawing room where the actual draft order is determined in front of team officials and other media members. What were some of the highlights from that overall experience for you?
I think, firstly, it was, it just like, I think when Dallas won the lottery, everyone's reaction and like the theme of the night was just utter disbelief, right? Like it was a combination of shock, surprise, laughter. You had execs saying like Nico traded Cooper for Luka for Cooper, right? Yeah. Like I think everyone, I don't want to say they were in on the bit, but like everyone had the same thoughts pretty much because it was such a wild outcome that I think was probably the most unpredictable way the lottery could have gone. I know they didn't have the longest odds, but it was probably the most like chaotic potential outcome. And then, there's a lot going on aside from San Antonio getting number 2 pick. There's the roller coaster ride of what happened with the Sixers and the Thunder's picks, which are kind of, conjoined there. And it was really funny. When you're in this room, you're in there the first 15 minutes, all your communications are taken away, your phone's taken away. If you have a digital watch, they take that from you. And so you're in there for like 75 minutes, hour and a half. And the lottery's done in 15 minutes. Like it goes like quick. And the rest of the time you're just there to talk to people. And at some point, the ESPN broadcast of the lottery comes on. And usually people don't watch it because they know what's going to happen already. Sometimes they do. Like I remember in 2019, the year that the Knicks were one of the 3 teams with the highest odds, they kept playing up the Knicks angle on the broadcast and like, so can the Knicks win the number 1 pick? And inside everyone knew it was already, not going to happen. And there was just like, some laughter at that. This time the broadcast was about how, if you remember, Kevin Nagandi at some point says the Sixers lost their first overall pick. And there was like some grumbling about it and some laughter about it. And then when he comes back around, he's like, oh, wait, never mind. They now have a top 4 pick. It was like the same type of reaction. It was this very in real time response to the broadcast vis-a-vis that you knew the future already. So it was like kind of funny to watch because everyone was watching the broadcast, including Sam Presti, who was obviously in the room there on behalf of the Thunder. But yeah, I think once everyone kind of like internalized that the Mavericks won the lottery, the vibes were interesting.
It's probably such a cool environment too because you don't have your phones. Like that's probably the first thing that people go to after like an event like that, and you not having that forces you to like actually interact with people. I'm sure it just creates like one of the more like unique environments that you can be in right now in sports.
Yeah, that's why I try to do it as often as I can. I think this was my like 5th or 6th time, and you're right. Like the fact that you take your phone away. Usually you find out and then you start texting your friends or you start texting people in the league that you don't have that option. And so you just start talking to some GM or you start talking to some NBA person and everyone's in the same wavelength. They're like, I got to talk about this. The only people I can talk about it with are stuck in this room with me. So let's just talk about it for the next hour and like try to digest what just happened.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
So Dallas getting the number 1 pick, unsurprisingly and understandably, set off a lot of talk from NBA fans about the lottery being rigged. Now, Mike, back in 2019, you wrote an article where you investigated the idea of rigging the lottery and how realistic of a scenario it would be to pull off. What were some of your big takeaways from doing that story?
Well, for one, the NBA does not like when you talk about rigging the lottery. I think understandably so. When I got on the phone to talk with someone from the NBA about this, I still remember their first response was, so you want to talk about committing a felony? which, you know, in the past where we've seen past lotteries get rigged, that yes, it was a crime to do that, right? We've seen that with state lotteries. So kind of a taboo subject, but you know, it's really hard to do. And I think that's why the league goes for the level of transparency that it does, right? It allows media members, allows someone from each team in there to make sure that everyone knows it's on the up and up. And, you know, we watch this big, clear lottery machine, this big drum with air circulating through it. And the ping pong balls come up to the very top in succession for 4 numbers, just to make sure everyone understands, like, this is how it works. Stop asking us after the fact if it's rigged. And I think it's fascinating. Really, it's more of like an exercise in how the human brain works more than anything else, right? If we're unable to unable to understand things that we did not expect or that we can't clearly explain, we start kind of creating conspiracy theories, right? And we've seen this a lot in the last few years. Like we start creating conspiracy theories to explain the unknowable or what we don't want to hear. And in some way, it also kind of just explains maybe our lack of really truly being able to internalize probabilities. Just that if something is unlikely to happen does not mean that it actually will not happen, right? So a 1.8 chance does not mean a 0.0% chance.
I also feel like a lot of fans don't realize that you can go watch what you saw. It is on NBA.com. They put the actual draft lottery in that room. That video is online. You can just go watch it. They don't publicize it that much, but it's there. You can go watch it.
It's not a very exciting video. Everyone's very chill in the room now, which I kind of don't like. I remember the first year I did it again was 2019, and it was the Zion lottery, and the Pelicans won, and Alvin Gentry was in there for the Pelicans, and he just jumped up and he screamed, you know, F yeah. And it was great. And I was like, this is how you need to react to winning the number 1 pick in a year with like a Zion like draft pick. And then every year since, like, everyone's like very quiet, very demure. Like Brian Wright, the year they won, you know, the Spurs won the Wemby draft, was just like sitting there quietly. And I'm like, guys, you should be okay. You can celebrate. You can fist pump. You can jump
sports.
up.
Come on.
Yeah. But everyone wants to be nice and professional and all that boring stuff we all hate.
Man, I need to go at some point because it's just like, it's so fascinating to me. You know, I think it is one of the cooler days. It's just hard whenever the conspiracies just make more sense in your brain than like the actual results, especially when it's tied to, like, it's not tied to, but it feels like it's tied to the Luka trade. Just like it just gets more muddy and more messy, you know, for the league itself. But, you know, I don't know. It's been such a wild week. I just can't believe it.
It's funny. I asked, like, it is tied to the Luka trade, right? Like, I think it's clearly tied.
Yeah,
if they don't trade, if they don't trade Luka, they don't miss the playoffs. They don't lose their play-in game. Like, they're not here. They're, you know, whatever happens to the team this series. And also it's tied to them winning the coin flip with the Chicago Bulls too, right? Like they had to win that coin flip to get 0.1% more lottery odds in the exact combination that they did. So, you know, sorry, Bulls fans. But it was funny. I asked a few executives, you know, I was like, would you trade Luka for Cooper and Anthony Davis in a 1st-round pick, right? Like, that's kind of what happened here. And a few think that they would have. So, like, when you're talking about, like, is this a trade I would make now? And in hindsight, like, it might be for a few, you know, kind of like teams around the league.
Yeah, I think, like, even in the future, like, this may all get lost, and you're like, wait, how did they get this team? It's like, well, they traded Luka, and then they ended up getting this team. Yeah, it's crazy. So let's keep talking about the Mavericks a little bit. The Mavs won. The Mavs win also had a lot of NBA people talking about whether there need to be any changes made about flattening the lottery odds to make this kind of scenario even less likely. In your conversations around the league, what is your impression of how teams feel about flattened lottery odds and whether there would be a push to revisit the draft lottery reform?
I find it funny, first of all. There is, I think, some teams top kind of like decision makers and teams who are interested in lottery reform, right? And this comes on the back of, like, a month and a half ago, we were talking about a different kind of lottery reform, which is to try to help against tanking, which would essentially be, you know, down weighting the lottery odds for the worst teams, right? To stop, you know, the Jazz from doing what they did or the Sixers from doing what they did. But the reaction out of this lottery, and I think they had it even before this, was just that, like, maybe we need to find a way to to give a way for the worst teams to get talent. You know, this is their best way to acquire like the potential great player. Like no free agent's going to go to Charlotte. Nobody's going to push their way to Utah. DC is a huge market, but that just hasn't been how their history has gone. And so it's, some people might be interested in kind of pushing up to 20% or whatever that might be for the worst teams. And it's kind of, it's a hard road to walk if you're the NBA trying to figure out like, okay, how do we make the lottery so nobody tanks? But then also, how do we make the lottery so the Washington Wizards can get out of this multi-year tank with some level of talent that's not, the number 6 pick and Alex Sarr? Because, the part of it too is not just, are you lucky in the lottery? Are you lucky in the lottery in the right year, right? Like getting the more pick last year is not the same as getting the pick this year or 2023.
Not even close. Yeah.
So in addition to attending the lottery, you also wrote an article this week for The Athletic about home court advantage in the playoffs and how its importance has changed over the years. This is obviously a huge topic for a lot of Nuggets and Thunder fans this weekend. What were some of the key stats from your findings? And do you have any theories as to why home court advantage isn't quite what it used to be?
Oh, man, I miss home court advantage. It was fun. RIP home court advantage. I guess we'll see for this weekend.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, the stats are... Well, the stats are pretty clear in that we've seen a trend over the last 10 years of home court advantage in the playoffs going down. Obviously, that correlates with home court advantage going down in the regular season too. Teams are winning a smaller percentage of their home games across the league. And, I think after, I think it was the game Wednesday night or something like that, or Tuesday night, home teams were just 31-30, these playoffs, which is crazy. Like they were winning 70% of their games like 8 years ago. Now they're barely above 500. You're talking about like basically this almost the same rate that home teams in air quotes won during the bubble in 2020 when there was no actual home court advantage, right? Everyone was playing in the same sterile place. My theory is that this kind of has to do with the rise of 3-point shooting, right? You see if teams shoot road teams shoot even one more three in a game than the home team, like they win the majority of the time in the playoffs this year. And I think in years past, last year too. And obviously 3-point variance can explain for a lot of it. Just if you're able to shoot threes well, you can make up for talent inefficiencies if you get hot. The Celtics, we've even seen that, right? Like 3-point variance has kind of explained their playoff path to some degree against the Knicks too. When they've shot poorly, they blow 20-point leads and they lose those games. So I think there's a correlation there. And, I haven't been able to do the research, but I'd be very curious to see what it says. But obviously the last 2 years have also been this very physical sort of playoffs where the referees have not been making as many calls, right? And so it's, usually the more talented teams are able to get to the line more frequently, right? And so that's another sort of variance that comes into play. So those are my two best theories for what's going on. And I'm kind of curious how this plays out in the conference finals and the finals as well, because, does it flatten things up a little bit more? And as we talk about the age of parity, this is just one more example of it and one more kind of stripping away of the advantages for large markets or great teams or whatever the case may be. Like this might be the first time since in the 3-point era where the NBA has had multiple 60-win teams in the season and not one of them gets beyond this conference semifinals, right? If the Thunder lose in Game 7. And the Celtics obviously get finished off by the Knicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been fascinating. It's been like totally unpredictable. Like I feel like as the playoffs go on, I feel like I just know less and less about what's going to happen or what these teams are going to do. It's just it's kind of great to cover. Like it makes it kind of a lot more fun. Last question, Mike. You cover the business of basketball for us here at The Athletic. Looking ahead to this summer, what are some stories that you expect to be following? Expansion, maybe the Blazers sale. What are some other things?
Yeah, the Blazers sale is a big one. They went up for sale officially earlier this week. The timing was very interesting because, as you said, expansion is at the forefront of the league. And so are they trying to front run expansion and see if they can get sold before maybe teams in Vegas or Seattle go on the market, right? Does that impact expansion at all too? Does the NBA choose to push expansion back to finish off the Blazers sale, because I don't know if you want 3 teams on the market all at once. That's not great from supply and demand standpoint, right? Let alone just trying to navigate all those things and have multiple bidders like across possibly like 3 different teams. Like that's a messy situation. So those are 2 things that I'll definitely be following. I am kind of curious to see, the further impact of the second apron and the finances of the new CBA, the financial rules of the CBA, right? Like the Celtics have a big decision to make if they keep this team together. They're paying $470 million or more in total salary plus luxury tax. Everyone's trying to duck out of it. Will the Bucks try to duck out of the tax altogether, right? Even if they keep Giannis, this is I think another kind of flashpoint in the new CBA, because the new repeater taxes kick in this summer, and they're going to be very, very, very expensive, which makes, even harder for teams to be living not only in the second apron, but just above the luxury tax altogether.
Yeah. On the Blazers
These are not
sale,
sexy things.
On the Blazers sale, it's so wild to me that, Phil Knight makes that offer of $2 billion back in 2022. And at the time, it seemed like, competitive. It didn't seem out of the realm of possibility that they might be sold, if there was some more negotiation. And now, just 3 years later, that would be such an uncompetitive offer. It seems like with the Celtics selling for $6 billion, like, is it realistic that the Blazers could be sold for like $4 billion? I mean, that's what the Suns were sold for.
I mean, I would think that's, I would think like $3.5 billion is the floor. The Hornets, right? Kind of a smaller market, no history kind of franchise, went for $3 billion a few years ago. I would think the Blazers are at 4, but again, and this is the qualifier that I'm throwing up as of right now, and I'm still trying to get a kind of like a lay of the land. But if you expect the NBA to expand within the next few years, do you show as much interest in the Blazers, right? Or do you try to get ahead of expansion and that drives the Blazers price up because some people are thinking they can get in for a cheaper price there to buy an NBA team? So the interplay of those 2 things is kind of fascinating. But yeah, like these prices are astronomical, and the Paul Allen Trust also has, or Paul Allen Estate also has the Seattle Seahawks, and like, what are they going to go for when they hit the market, right? Yeah. Like, are we going to see a $10 billion NFL team? Like all these numbers to just, who's rich enough to buy them becomes the question here.
And I'm super interested because in this case in Portland, the city owns the building, the Moda Center. And so that wouldn't be part of the deal, similar to what happened in Boston. So I don't know how that would affect it. Although clearly it didn't really affect it in Boston since they went for $6 billion. But yeah, I'm super interested to see how it plays out, because that whole area where the Moda Center is, it like hasn't really been built up. Like there's just not a ton around that arena. And so I'm interested to see like what a new owner would want to do with that entire space when they don't own the building.
Yeah. And there's also kind of like a time, I don't want to say time crunch, but there's, time's important here, because I think the Blazers are set to refurbish the Moda Center over the next few summers, ahead of the WNBA team getting there. And I think they're hosting a women's Final Four as well. So who pays for that if she continue, either whether the Blazers continue to own the team, whether Jody Allen continues to own the team or she sells it to someone else, like who pays for that? Do you want to pay for remodeling the Moda Center if you come in and you buy the team and you want to build your own thing for the reasons that you said?
Right. Yeah. Now, Mike, before you go, we are going to put you on the spot, because every week for the last 4 weeks, we've been doing an NBA championship draft. You can see the results from the last 4 weeks. Now, this week, we're only going to draft 3 teams because we're getting close to the end here. Now, how this works is we're just going to each pick one team. Now, I did do a special this week, a 2-for-1 special. You can take Denver and get Boston. You can get both 2-for-1. So think about that. Something to think about. Now, Mike, would you like to draft first, second, or third? How confident are you in who you think the NBA champion is going to be? Which I feel like is the hardest question ever in my lifetime at this point in the playoffs.
I feel like we were just talking about the fact that nobody knows anything anymore. So I don't know what the value is of the first overall pick. Do I get anything for picking last? Do I get 2 picks? Like, what are the rules here? How can I
normally
game
you
them?
would, because it normally it was a snake draft, but in this case, there's not really a benefit to the third because we just don't have enough teams left.
All right, I still want to pick last because I want to be able to say that I got the last pick and still was right.
All right, Andrew. Andrew, I'm going to make you pick first because you made me pick first last week, and I will pick
that's
second.
fair. That's fair.
All right, Andrew.
Oh, this is brutal.
So as a reminder, people, you can pick the Pacers, the Knicks, the Wolves, the Thunder, or you can take the Nuggets and the Celtics. Now, we're recording on Friday, so the Celtics may be out by tomorrow, but it's still 2 teams for the price of 1. Think about that.
I'll take 2 teams for the price of 1. Give me Denver, Boston.
Really?
Wow. Will they kick you out of Oklahoma City for that?
Now, why would you make
know.
that your choice?
I'm just going with my gut, I guess. I have no idea. I have nothing to back any of this up with. Nothing.
I know. I don't really have anything to back any of this up with either. Man, that's a shocker, Andrew.
Yep. Part of it is I just wanted to put you in a weird spot is really my only mission within all of this.
Yeah. Not great. My choice is between OKC and Minnesota. I've been really impressed with Minnesota this playoffs, though I do think whoever they play in the next round is going to be a significant jump up compared to a Steph-less Warriors team and that Lakers team that was just ended up being a terrible matchup. Yeah, I think it's going to be a big jump. So I don't want to get too excited because I did the same thing with the Cavs when they beat the Heat. I was like, oh my gosh, the Cavs look unstoppable. And of course, they dealt with some injuries. All right, I'm going to go with OKC.
Yeah.
So that leaves Mike. You could have either of the Eastern Conference representatives, assuming Boston gets knocked out at some point, or you could take the Wolves.
I do find it interesting that both of you chose teams that could, like Andrews, both of your teams can be out of it by the end of the weekend.
And mine, yeah.
And yours could be gone as well. And you guys just you want to live in the uncertainty. So I'm going to be a coward. I'm just going to pick a team that I know is going to be there. I'm going to take Minnesota.
Yeah. Part of it is, and maybe Andrew feels this way too, if Denver, Boston, or OKC wins the championship, it makes sense in the historical context of the NBA. If any of these other teams win, it's going to be an outlier compared to what we've thought like a title contender, a title winning team needs to look like in the regular season. Yeah. They're going to stand out. And so maybe that's why we're attracted to these teams, even though it is so precarious. Because like you said, they could be knocked out by the end of the weekend.
Yeah. I have nothing insightful to say except for I cannot wait to watch these basketball games.
I could wait a 30-point for Game 7.
You don't want to watch Game 7?
I'm sorry. I just give me a couple more days. I do appreciate that I got 2 days.
You get 2 days, yeah.
2 days.
You get 2 days to live a normal life, and then you get to experience Game 7. Hey, go read Mike Vorkunov at The Athletic. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, Al. It's time to bring on somebody that every time I talk to her, I feel like I learned something, and I'll simultaneously feel like I don't know that much about basketball, and it excites me to bring Caitlin Cooper back on the pod. Basketball She Wrote is her blog, and she is just a gift to the NBA community. Caitlin, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on. That feels a little hyperbolic, but I appreciate it.
Whatever. It's true. It's true. We love hearing your insights about the Pacers. So let's start by going back to mid-December when everything started clicking for this Pacers team. From December 13th, Indiana won 70% of its games and had a top 8 offense and defense per clean the glass. What were some of the major factors that led to the second half success that we saw for the Pacers?
I think the biggest turning point was, ironically, they went winless in the in-season tournament after being the darlings of the in-season tournament a year ago. And because of that, they got 4 days off to really recoup from practices, to finally get healthy. I think that they went back to the drawing board on some things, and the most important returns was Andrew Nemhard was no longer on a minutes restriction. He was the biggest motivating factor in my mind on the strides that they made at the defensive end. He sets the tone there. Aaron Nesmith, it took him a little bit longer to come back, but they got their point of attack defenders back. Tyrese Halliburton made some strides on that end of the floor. They started turning the ball over a lot less, which is important to them, not only offensively, but also defensively, especially for a team that plays so quickly. It can be very hard for them to stop on a dime and get back. Plus, that allows them to set their ball pressure defense, which is very important to their scheme there. They found a role that suits Pascal Siakam. Miles Turner got better. A lot of things were all coalescing at the same time, but them having that practice time and being healthy, I think, was the biggest motivating factors in what the turnaround ended up being. In addition to this, I think it was most people expected that Tyrese Halliburton, once he started looking more like Tyrese Halliburton, that the offense would come around, and it did. What they did defensively was a much bigger surprise, at least to me, and what my coverage was.
So I wanted to ask you about defensively, because a lot of the analysis about the Pacers defensively focuses on targeting Tyrese Halliburton as like the weak link in their defense. And we saw the Cavs go after him in the series. And yet, as you pointed out in your podcast after Game 5, the Cavs were not as successful as you might have expected in those situations. So what have the Pacers done to limit the damage of this expected weak link in their defense?
Yeah, I think Games 1 and Game 5 both point to the answer to that. So at the end of Game 1, Tyrese actually got 3 stops in a row just by himself on possessions against Donovan Mitchell, against Ty Jerome, and then on a closeout to Max Strus. So Ty, in and of himself, I think very quietly made strides on the defensive end where the Pacers were a little bit more willing to switch with him than what you would have seen in the playoffs a year ago when it was a lot more show and recover. And then just his overall activity, his deflections are up. He's very good at using his length over like roughly the last 2 years. I think that he leads all guards and blocks on 3-point shots. Some of what they do defensively, there's a lot more peel switching now. So when he peels out to the perimeter, he gets to use that length against shooters more. And then also I think he's fairly self-aware. He looks for places to scram himself out of mismatches, and he can be creative with that. And he talks before the season started that he felt like when he reviewed the film that he just wasn't always in the right place at the right time, especially as an off-ball defender. And I think that speaks to some of his better forced turnover rate, his better deflection rate. He's in the right places at the right time, and he's been better at knowing where he can cheat and win. But also the Pacers' defensive scheme at the end of Game 5 was very good at insulating him. It was, if he does get that switch, Andrew Nemhard sinking off, he's getting his hand on a ball. Miles Turner being effective as a rim protector behind him. Aaron Nesmith in the key sequence in the fourth quarter. I think it was Darius Garland went after Tyrese, and he reached from behind, poked it from Garland, and then made the layup at the other end. So just the overall fabric of the defense with the other 4 guys, particularly in that starting lineup, I think has supported him as well when you're looking at just what Tyrese's numbers are when he's the screener defender, and they're not as bad as you would expect them to be when you're just looking at his individual defense in isolation.
The Pacers offense was incredibly efficient in the Cavs series, posting the best offensive rating for any team in the second round. While it's understandable how the Cavs injuries affected their offense, why weren't they more successful defensively against Indiana? And what didn't work about their approach?
It was like polar opposite approaches from the two teams, right? Because the Cavs were trying to take out the Pacers' strongest links. They were having Max Strus and Okoro face guarding Tyrese pretty much nonstop in that series. And at the other end of the floor, Donovan Mitchell was kind of quote unquote dominating the Pacers, in part because the Pacers were like, we're going to take away the lyricism and movement in your offense. You were the number 1 pick and roll offense in the NBA. You had tons of cutting around the pick and roll. They decided to stay home on everything. And as it turns out, the Cavs ended up finishing with fewer passes per 100 in that series than the 30th ranked team during the regular season. And the Pacers, conversely, ended up finishing with fewer closeouts per 100 possessions than the 30th ranked team in the NBA this season. So they really stayed home on those shooters. They weren't having to close out, and that allowed Donovan Mitchell in some games to get, 40, 50 points. But speaking specifically of the Pacers, because the Cavs were like, we're going to test your weak links. The Pacers are a deep team, especially with the strides that Andrew Nemhard has made. He was very critical in that series because the Pacers were playing 4-on-4 pick and roll possessions a lot, with Tyrese being more like, negative space and art. He likes to stand out on the perimeter and give his teammates space, and 4-on-4 can be very effective for the Pacers. So I think at one point in time in the middle of that series, Nemhard and Turner were the number 1 pick and roll combo in the NBA. And that of course speaks to Nemhard being capable as a secondary ball handler, but also, like I just said, it can be advantageous for teams with the extra space that you have on the court when you're playing 4-on-4. So I think that's in part why the Cavs weren't as successful as they wanted to be, because they were, gearing up more towards Tyrese and Pascal. And then Aaron, Andrew, and Miles Turner have been three of the most effective shooters in the playoffs. So when you forget about those guys, they're capable of making you pay as well.
You mentioned Nesmith and Nembhard. They've been huge playoff risers so far. Both are posting numbers well above their regular season averages. They've been shooting the lights out. They're both finishing their third seasons in Indiana. I was wondering, for each player, what do you think has been the biggest area of development in their games over these last 3 seasons for Nembhard and Nesmith?
I think Aaron in particular, since he came back from the ankle injury, what I've noticed from him is he's simplified his reads against closeouts. He's been one of the most effective players attacking closeouts in the postseason. He's improved as a movement shooter, so he can shoot on the move more. I think a lot of times when people are looking at how effective Nesmith and Nembhard have been, in particular as shooters in the playoffs, Nembhard's a little bit harder to explain because he's just like upped his volume on 3 pull-up threes, and suddenly he's just drilling over 50% of them. But it's almost like a trickle-down effect because teams are geared up more on Tyrese and face guarding him. That means Nembhard's running more pick and roll. And because Nembhard's running so much more pick and roll, that means that Aaron Nesmith, teams are hiding their smaller guards on Aaron more because they don't want him navigating so many picks against Andrew. So that's been very advantageous for Aaron in these playoffs, where he's now more often being guarded by Garland, Mitchell, Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green, almost all of which he has a size advantage on. So I think that people are looking at his 3-point percentage and thinking, oh, that's just solely an effect of Tyrese. And certainly Tyrese sets the table, has a lot of gravity, creates open shots for his teammates, but Aaron's actually making a higher percentage while being guarded more in the playoffs because he's able to still shoot over the top of those contests. His average, I think last year I looked at his average matchups were more like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Chris Middleton last year, all guys with a size advantage. So he was shooting like 27% from 3 in the playoffs last year. Now he's up over 40. So I think, and he's just capable of making tougher shots. Like I mentioned, he's been more effective as a movement shooter than what you would have seen in the past. He does more of that now that Buddy Hield isn't on the roster. So I think that's 2 of them. And then just for Nembhard, I think he's been the best defender on the Pacers for 2 seasons now, but he's taken that to an extra even, he didn't average enough minutes and games to be qualified for all defense, but I think he's an all defense caliber defender.
We're recording on Friday morning prior to Game 6 of Celtics-Knicks. If it ends up being the Knicks, it would be a rematch of last year's second round series, which went 7 games. The Knicks have made significant roster changes since that series. I'm interested in your thoughts on the Knicks defense, which has been pretty improved since the start of the playoffs. How real do you think that improvement is, and how might the Pacers try to break that down?
Yeah, if you would have asked me during this question during the regular season, I would have been like, the Knicks aren't really capable of playing the type of defense that limits the Pacers the most, and the Pacers aren't really capable of playing the type of defense that limits the Knicks the most. And now both have kind of adjusted that in the postseason. So the Knicks have done a lot of switching against Boston, and that worked for them through the first 4 games. And Game 5, they did a lot of switching, and this is not me trying to denigrate Jason Tatum at all, but because they didn't have Jason Tatum, the Celtics had to rely on a lot more ball movement in that game, and the Knicks switching was harder because of that. There was a lot more ghost screening, a lot more Spain actions, and this is a team that didn't switch all year. They're not really used to having to navigate all of that. So once the Celtics were moving the ball more, the switching became a lot less effective for them. So I think using that game as a guide, and we'll see how Game 6 goes, I think that bodes somewhat in the Pacers' favor because they're the number 1 passing team in the NBA. They're going to move the ball. They don't isolate a lot. So if they're going to be switching, it's going to look a little different than what the Celtics were doing in the first 4 games with, some of their offense, becoming a little bit catch and hold with Tatum on some of those isolations where it became easier for OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges to be loading up on some of those actions. It was harder for them to do that in Game 5 when the ball was moving for Boston, and that's how the Pacers prefer to play. So I think defensively it could be a comfortable matchup for both teams. I'll put it that way.
Well, Caitlin, thank you for answering all of our questions about the Pacers. But it is now time to play Andrew versus the Beat, our weekly trivia show where Andrew goes head-to-head against an NBA beat writer. This week, the challenger is Caitlin Cooper from Basketball She Wrote. Now, Caitlin, you've played this before. I came up with 8 questions all about the Pacers. Some are easy, some are hard. You'll give me a number between 1 and 8. It'll correspond to a question. If you get it right, you'll get at least 2 points. And if you get it wrong, Andrew will have a chance to steal for 1. And we'll go back and forth until all the questions have been asked and answered. So to start us off, I just need a number between 1 and 8.
Let's go with number 2, Andrew Nemhard's number.
Question number 2. This is the Pacers' second consecutive conference finals appearance. There are only 2 Eastern Conference teams who have never made consecutive conference finals. Can you name both? And you do get 1 point per correct answer.
Ever made consecutive? Well, we know it's not Boston, not Cleveland, not the Pacers. I doubt it's Detroit. It's got to be a team that just hasn't had a lot of success. So, I mean, one of them has to be the Hornets, right?
That is correct for 1 point.
Not Miami. Not Orlando. Probably not Brooklyn. Probably not the Knicks either. Is it Washington?
Washington has done it once upon a time back in the 70s. Andrew, you have any guesses who the other team is?
What about Toronto?
It's Toronto, which is a little surprising. I thought those DeRozan teams at some point.
I had a little bit of doubt about them, but like everybody else that we ran through, like makes sense.
Okay, question number 1. During round 1, Tyrese Halliburton had double-digit assists in 4 consecutive playoff games. There are only 10 players in NBA history who have accomplished that feat, including 2 active players. Who are the 2 active players that have had 10-plus assists in 4 consecutive playoff games? You get 1 point per correct answer.
Nikola Jokic?
No, Andrew. Bad. Okay, Caitlin, you get a chance to steal.
That's the first time you've ever said bad to me after answering.
Bad, Andrew.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Chris
Caitlin.
Paul.
Yes, a very good guess. Very good guess. Chris Paul is one of the answers. Can you get the other name?
I'm going to go with LeBron.
LeBron. No, it is a guy who's currently playing. In fact, he plays on Jokic's team, Andrew. It is, of course, Russell Westbrook.
Russell Westbrook, son of a gun. Yeah, that was bad. I deserved the bad.
I don't know if I would have gotten that poll.
It's kind of surprising that Jokic hasn't done it. Okay, Caitlin, you're up by 1 and you control the board.
Go with number 7.
Question number 7. Oh, yeah, this one's hard. Pascal Siakam leads the Pacers in career playoff games with 80 games played. He leads the team. Which NBA player has Siakam played the most playoff games against with 12 games played?
Well, my first inclination was Giannis because I know that the Raptors played the Bucks in the playoffs and the Pacers have played him twice, but Giannis didn't play last year. It's an active player that he's played the most playoff games against.
Correct.
And I think the Raptors played Boston. They played Milwaukee in that run. Who else did they play in the run to it? The other inclination is LeBron, because it feels like every Eastern Conference player probably plays the most playoff games against LeBron. Let's go with LeBron. I feel like that's the safe answer here.
It is a safe answer, but would you believe he's only played LeBron in the playoffs 6 times? Only played him 6 times.
So then it might have been
I don't know
Giannis.
if he missed some games. Andrew, you have any guesses?
I'll say Giannis.
So, Kalen, you're on the right track because it is a Buck, but it's not Giannis because he did miss so many games. It is Brook Lopez.
I should have thought of that. I didn't think about it until you phrased it like that. Like, I don't know why I didn't think of that. Because he played in both series
Andrew,
against the Pacers.
You have control of the board.
I'll go 3.
Question number 3. When this player has been on the court for Indiana in the playoffs, the Pacers have held teams to 24.2 fewer points per 100 possessions compared to when he is off the court. Among players who have played 300 minutes in this year's playoffs, that is the biggest on-off swing defensively. Who is the player?
No.
Wow. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Pressure's
Andrew,
on then.
You better get it right.
I better get it right. Is it Miles Turner?
No, Andrew, bad. Caitlin. Caitlin, do you have a guess?
I think it's Pascal.
Is Pascal Siakam. 24.2. How about that? Okay,
He's like the
Caitlin, you
99th
have a,
percentile in swing during the regular season, too. Let's go number 4.
Oh, really? Yeah. Question number 4. Miles Turner already has 25 blocks this postseason, which leads all players in the league, unless Chet had more than 3 last night. I didn't actually look it up after that.
He did not.
Okay, he did not. Great. There are only 3 Pacers who have ever had a postseason with 25 plus blocks. Can you name all 3? So this is in a single playoff run. They get 25 plus blocks. 3 Pacers in the past have done it, other than Miles.
Wow.
You get 1 point per correct answer.
Jermaine O'Neal.
That is 1. Correct.
Correct.
Roy Hibbert.
Roy Hibbert, that is correct. Can you get the final name in all 3
Rick
points?
Smits.
It is not Rick Smits. Andrew, you can steal 1 point.
Oh, boy.
25 plus blocks.
25 plus blocks.
Not Miles Turner. We said Roy Hibbert. We said Jermaine O'Neal.
Yeah, those are names that were obvious to me. Gosh, I don't know. This feels wrong. Also, Dale Davis.
Andrew, that is correct. Wow, for 1 point. There you go, Andrew. Does the comeback start now? You're down 5-2, Andrew, but you have control of the board.
Wow. I'm in shock that was correct. Number 5.
Question number 5. Aaron Nesmith has already committed 40 fouls through 10 playoff games. The last time the Pacers made consecutive conference finals in the 98 and 99 playoffs, who led the Pacers in personal fouls committed in both playoff runs? Easy question. There you go.
Wait. What?
Okay, so forget the intro, okay? It's about Aaron Nesmith. Not important.
Yeah.
When the Pacers made consecutive conference finals in 98 and 99, who was the Pacer that led them in personal fouls committed in both playoff runs?
Wow.
Who was just out there hacking away?
Feels like it would be one of the last 2 guys that we mentioned, Dale Davis or Rick Smits.
Which one are you going to say, Andrew?
I'll say Rick Smits.
Andrew, that is correct. It is now 5-4 with 2 questions remaining.
Here,
All
I
right,
thought we were
Caitlin.
talking about the consecutive conference finals against the Heat. I was going to be like, I don't know, is it Roy or Lance Stevenson? Let's go number 6.
Oh, they did, didn't they? So it wasn't the last time. It was 2 times ago. They've made consecutive conference finals a lot.
Yeah,
you said
I have.
6.
Good
Okay.
things come in pairs.
This is I love this question that I wrote. What is James Johnson's career high in the playoffs? Now, before you answer, you get to choose who answers first. So you can make Andrew guess, and then you can go higher or lower. Or you can guess, and then Andrew goes higher or lower. If either of you got it exactly correct, you would get a bonus point. So we're talking about James Johnson, his career high in points in the playoffs over his entire career.
I'm going to let Andrew guess it.
All right, Andrew,
Wow.
where would you like to set the bar? Think back to all those James Johnson playoff moments.
21.
And Caitlin, would you like to go higher or lower than 21?
Trying to think which team he would have been playing for where he would have a career high. Was this going to be like the Heat? I feel like he's going to be more apt to be like racking up handoff assists than he's going to be racking up points. But
Right.
I'll go lower. I feel like it's going to be less than 21, but it's probably wrong.
Andrew, you were within 3 points
Okay.
of the correct answer. The correct answer was 18,
Dang
which
it.
means
Let's
Caitlin
go.
gets the points.
Was he playing for the
Andrew-
Heat? Which team was it?
Well, I was
He had
just
to
gonna
have
go
been.
look that up. Yeah, who were his other teams? I mean, he played on the
Played
Wolves,
for
right?
the Raptors. He played for the who else in the East? All that's coming to mind is the Raptors and the Heat.
Raptors. He played for Dallas for a hot minute.
I
think he started in Chicago, right?
I'm going to spend a lot of time looking this up. So just sit back.
This better be
relax.
good.
Oh my
This
gosh, he's played so many seasons.
Yeah, yeah.
Here we go. All right, drum roll. It was the Miami Heat. Not that exciting.
Okay,
However,
cool.
his second highest was with the Memphis Grizzlies. So that's kind of interesting.
I didn't even remember he played for the Memphis Grizzlies. So
Yeah.
It was in a game against OKC. Okay, Andrew, you can't win the week. You've already lost. Okay, Caitlin's already beat you. But you can make it really close so that it looks like it was a
Right, cue the smoke.
you can make it closer so that people who are looking back at the score will be like, wow, that was a really close one. Okay, so here we go. There are 9 Indiana Pacers who have had a playoff run where they've hit at least 25 three-pointers, and we're going to name them all. So how this works, Andrew will give me a name, then Caitlin will give me a name, and we'll go back and forth until one of you stumbles. So this is a single playoff run hitting at least 25 three-pointers. And it has to be
Reggie Miller.
Reggie Miller, great guess, Andrew. That is correct. All right, Caitlin.
Paul George.
Paul George did it multiple times. Andrew.
Goodness. I had a guess, but I think that it's definitely wrong. Danny Granger?
Yeah, Danny Granger did it. Sure.
Okay.
Back to Caitlin.
I feel like we need people who would have been making longer playoff runs. So did George Hill do it?
George Hill did do it. All right. You guys have gotten 4 of the 9 names, 5 names remaining. Andrew, who would you like to guess next?
Did CJ Miles do it?
DJ Miles. No, Andrew, I'm sorry. I don't even know if he was close. Caitlin, any other
I don't think
other
he
names?
was.
It's impressive you remembered him, though.
Is Chris Mullins on the list?
No, I'm surprised. There's 4
Really?
players on the current Pacers team that are on this list. Halliburton,
Really?
Nembhard, Neesmith, and Miles Turner have all done.
Miles Turner. See, I was going to guess Miles Turner, but man.
I was like
And
thinking
then,
about the
and then
past. I don't know. Stuck in the past.
That's what I was. This
Yeah, the oldest name.
in the past.
Actually, I don't know if this is the oldest name, but Jalen Rose also did it. That was like the one kind of surprising based on the era.
Yeah, for real.
Okay, but ending there, Caitlin, you have won 7-4. Congratulations for winning Andrew versus the Beat.
Wow.
Feels good.
Everybody go subscribe to Basketball She Wrote. Anything else that you'd like to share, Caitlin, before we go?
Yeah, I'm always thankful for people to subscribe at Basketball She Wrote. There's free membership as well as paid membership over there. I'm happy to have you at either option. And then Samson Folk, who I'm doing post-game pods with after every playoff game, is also writing gamers for me over there. He's my favorite basketball writer / talker in the internet sphere. And I'm really happy that after, as I told you guys ahead of time, after being sick for a lot of the portion of this season, that I get to podcast again. So thankful for the invitation here, and thankful to anybody that wants to check us out doing more so vodcasts on YouTube after these games.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Saturday Slam Jam. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We will read it on the show. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend and the basketball. And we'll talk to you guys again next week.